He's enabling this. He's not only enabling the takeover of our lands, he's enabling all of these people who may be coming here to seek a better life, right? Who may be coming here to seek a better life, that die in the fucking channel. That's blood on these politicians' hands. Because again, they don't see these people as people. They don't see these people with families and with a homeland to go to and a homeland to make it prosper. They see these people as economic and political units, ladies and gentlemen. Say what you want about nationalists, right, with their nationalist sentiment. And we've got a statement to go over from Steve Laws in a moment, which really puts into contrast, right? He doesn't beat around the bush with what Steve says. He doesn't beat around the bush at all, right? Says it exactly as it is, whether you agree with him or not. But at the very least, when I've spoken to nationalists, you can see they actually see people as people. They understand these people don't belong here, and we don't want them here. We don't want them here in the numbers that they come here in many ways that the people don't want them here at all, right? For whatever reason, because it's our home, and we decide who comes into our home. And we want to keep this home for ourselves. It's the only one we have, and we lose it in a peril. But we understand that we don't want anything to really negatively happen to those people. We want to be able for them to go home and have self-determination in their own homelands, but their home is not here. But they actually see them as people. The left sees these people as political units. The right, in many instances, the nationalists, see these people as actually people. Not just their own people either. They might prioritize their own people. They have to. We have to at this point because nobody else will. But at the very least, they see people as people. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen. Steve Laws, prominent nationalist, was recently arrested, right? Founded, it was part of Homeland, but it's now left Homeland a little while ago. Grievances with the leader Kenny Smith, I believe. Founded the Remigration Now initiative, but he spoke at the Patriotic Alternative Conference recently. Now, Patriotic Alternative has had many different, people call it different things, right, over the years. Right, it's been called, fascist, neo-Nazi, etc. I don't know enough about it to say that. But he spoke at the conference recently. A lot of his remarks are probably going to shock you, ladies and gentlemen. It was a 20-odd minute speech. We're not going to go through all of it, right? But it says something very, very interesting at the start of that, right? The start of this thing, which is really how a true nationalist speaks, and really speaks to how they do see these people as people, even if they see that they want to get rid of millions of them because they don't belong here, right, for whatever reason. Have a listen to this, ladies and gentlemen, and let me know what you think. There's a bit here which I'm going to go through in a moment that's very, very important, which I'm going to break down to really highlight this point. But just have a listen to this.
Okay, so can you hear me all right? So I'm assuming most of you guys never thought you'd see me back here, but I am very grateful to be back here. Thanks, Mark, for inviting me back. Looking in front of me right now, this is clearly the largest nationalist organisation in the country. It's not even close. So thank you for having me to speak. Mark's asked me to speak on remigration. I'm assuming most of you guessed that anyway. The migrant hunter, thank you for that. Suppose it's quite a classy nickname. At the time I wasn't so keen, but now I'm probably leaning into it a little bit. But let me get started. So like the Africans, yes I know, another Martin Luther King quote, like the Africans, I have a dream. But my dream's a little bit better. My dream is to see millions and millions of immigrants removed from our country. Some people may get a little bit uncomfortable when you use this language, but the reality is, without millions of people being removed from this country, we are not going to have a future for our people. Our children are going to grow up as hated minorities, and that to me is unacceptable. I do not care if these people came over illegally, I do not care if they came over legally, I do not care if they were born here, I do not care if their grandparents were born here. These people have to leave. This is not their lands, this is ours, and we will not tolerate it.
Check what he said there, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Steve's saying there, he used Martin Luther King as a reference, right, which is very interesting. And again, playing into the nickname of migrant hunter and all of these things, you think very, harsh language, brings up, a lot of people will then instantly be thrown back to visualizations from the 1930s and 40s and so on. But anyway, there was one thing that he said there, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of these people, they tend to be, most people would describe them as anti-Semitic, for example, tend to be quite hostile to the state of Israel, more sympathetic towards the Palestinians, for example. Again, you're seeing that kind of horseshoe kind of develop from there, right? But understanding who your own native people are at the very, very heart. But you're seeing that horseshoe kind of manifest. But what did he say there, which is quite interesting, ladies and gentlemen, sort of echoes the sentiment that I had in my conversation with Josh Fernie, for example, who's still part of the Homeland Party, is that he said there, our children are going to grow up hating minorities, and that to me is unacceptable. Now that's interesting. That's interesting. Not something that you would hear from anybody that's aspiring to, say, be the leader of the Fourth Reich, in my opinion. And again, it echoes the sentiment of, look, we understand, right, the plight of people around the world, and we see these people as people, but this is our home, and politicians have no right to give it away, right? And we do not want these people here. As said, millions and millions of millions of people who never ever should have been allowed here have come into the country via legal and illegal means. I say legal with massive, again, every time I say legal now, ladies and gentlemen, think of the massive inverted commas instantly around it, right? Because what the politicians have done with the system is completely illegal. And how they've weaponized it, and how they didn't keep to their campaign promises at the very least. But there you're seeing it. There, he's actually seemingly echoing some concern that if we don't do something, and like a snowball rolling down a hill, ladies and gentlemen, picking up more snow and getting bigger and faster as it goes along and more destructive. If our politicians way back when, in the 70s, 80s, 60s, had nipped this problem in the bud and stopped it dead, right, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't be having this conversation. We need to have this conversation now, and we need to enact these measures now because of how far the problem has progressed. So, like, again, now, when you had a snowball that started to roll down the hill, if you stop the snowball when it's nice and small, it's very easy to stop. Now we have this massive cascading boulder that's like a big tsunami wave that's coming down towards our communities, and it's been pillaging our communities for generations. Right? Because our politicians, in not many instances, have actively done anything about it, but actively demonized people for being opposed to it, and have actively furthered these agendas in opposition to the native British people. Now we need more drastic means. And typically, when you start getting more and more and more and more into the extremes, you start looking at more and more violent and forceful means. That's just the reality, and none of us like it. And Steve says openly later on in this speech, the next couple of minutes or so, it says that, look, it's not going to be all kumbaya, everybody's going to come to some big understanding and they're all going to get back on the planes and boats and whatever and go back to wherever they come from willingly. A lot of them are going to do it unwillingly, and it's going to be, and he actually uses the phrase, by any means necessary, which obviously is very concerning, but it's just a mark of how big the problem has gotten. It's a mark of how big the problem has gotten, and the fact that we now need more and more drastic solutions to solve it, or more and more forceful solutions, if you will, to solve it. Because this is an hour war for our very existence, ladies and gentlemen. And many of the people who've come here, both through legal and illegal means, openly say they're coming here to take us over. And they're happy that we are losing our home. They're happy that we are genociding ourselves and being replaced in our own home. They're exceedingly happy about it. They see it as revenge. They see it as justice and whatever. And we cannot stand for that. We will die as a people if we don't do anything. Make no mistake, and it could be as soon as the next generation even. But what you see there, ladies and gentlemen, is there's still not an inherent hatred for everybody else around the world. And he says this, and he says, our children are going to grow up hating minorities, and that to me is unacceptable. So you see there, he doesn't want his children seemingly to grow up hating people just for whatever reason. But what you're now seeing, ladies and gentlemen, and this was encapsulated perfectly with the attitudes embodied in a Stephen Crowder clip that happened recently when he went into the barbershop and spoke to a bunch of black men. And they're saying they're pro-reparations and all of this stuff, right? And how they're, again, taking up a lot of this stuff and hold racial grievances against people for things that they never did, right? Everything that's being done in the name of racial justice, in the name of multiculturalism, in diversity, equity, and inclusion, is breeding the most radical right wing. And in many instances, people who would take me, for example. I'm not saying that I actually am, right? But many instances now where people's perspectives have drastically changed. And in Stephen's case, he was observing that many of the people he was seeing now that were not like it before are actually turning racist because they're seeing how much the system is being weaponized against them unfairly for things that they never do, for policies that they never asked for people that this is not their home. In our case, this is where we are distinct from America. You're seeing there, that's an interesting line right there. Our children are going to grow up hating minorities, and that to me is unacceptable. That's what I think. A lot of the people, they don't understand. They don't necessarily on the fringe right, if you will. It's some of them at least. Nationalists who are unapologetic about being nationalists. They don't necessarily hate anybody for who they are, for where they come from. They hate the fact that their people are being systematically eliminated, systematically ethnically cleansed from their cities, that they're being colonized, that their country is being turned into a foreign country, and they know exactly what happens to minorities in other areas of the world where these people come from. Again, ladies and gentlemen, right there, if you're looking on screen, right there. That's what we stand to gain, right? That right there. Many instances it already has happened to our women and children. It only stands to get worse unless we do anything. But it's interesting. Contrast that right there with what you heard from Run Up Yorwith. And the contrast couldn't be more clear. Part of the message to you for this episode is this, ladies and gentlemen. Plaid are not nationalists. They say so themselves. They're internationalists. They're focused on everybody but you. They're focused on everybody but you. The Welsh person. You need to understand that. I think the only way we're going to get out of this, ladies and gentlemen, with the next election that's coming up in Wales next year, it needs to be too big to rig. You saw that's what worked in America. Too big to rig. And the Democrats tried to do everything they possibly fucking could to rig that election. All right? We need to make it too big to rig because they're going to try and form a coalition to, for example, keep Reform out. And I do think, at the very least, in this instance, Reform are going to be the best of a bad bunch. The best of a bad bunch. And with so little time, I dare say we're going to have to try and get more people out. I'm not committing to this yet, but we're going to have to try and get more people out to potentially vote for them and support them at the very least, because they are at least maybe a stepping stone towards a better future for Wales. Or maybe, if you want to go down the Welsh independence route, maybe we can have a look at other Welsh independence parties, like Plaid, for example, who seem to not be going along with the same globalist framework and actually seemingly want to be putting the people of Wales first in a kind of more separatist format. So maybe something we can explore as well. Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Leave your thoughts down in the comments. But it needs to be too big to rig. And it needs to be too big to the point that the coalition is not going to win out. Right? The coalition is, any coalition they were going to make wouldn't even be able to compete with the amount of turnout in opposition to these globalists that want to sacrifice you and your future generations, your entire country, and all your lineage on the altar of diversity, multiculturalism, and colonization, and your replacement. If you enjoyed that clip, then make sure to go on over to the Voice of the Valleys X page at VOT_Valleys on X. We're also on Instagram at Voice of the Valleys. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that good stuff. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon. Godspeed.